Yo, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel, and in this video, I'm going to be showing you a recap of our auction league, the Auction League of Bros. It is a 10-man league, and we have a $200 budget for our draft. So instead of a standard snake draft, an owner puts a player up, and everyone bids on that player, and the highest bidder gets that player on their team. This is a Superflex league as well, half PPR. And this is the 4th year of the Auction League of Bros. And with that being said, we're ready to take a look at the draft here. So this is my team right here, the Iron Men. So there's not really a better way to look at this, at least that I can find on this ESPN website, which is where our draft and league is on. So with the first player I selected was Jonathan Taylor, running back of the Colts. He's pretty much the consensus #1 overall pick in fantasy. If Christian McCaffrey didn't have an injury-riddled last couple of seasons, he would probably be the #1 pick, especially in a half PPR league where you get points for all those catches that he likes to get. But I went with Jonathan Taylor, and I was a little upset at first when I got Jonathan Taylor because I have him in Dynasty, and I have him in my other main league, just the regular League of Bros, 10 years running, non-PPR. So I have him in all 3 of my leagues. Well, I joined a 4th league after this draft, but in the 3 main leagues of mine, I have Jonathan Taylor. So it's a little risky to have that kind of exposure to one player, but when that player is as good as Jonathan Taylor, it's hard not to like it. He was amazing last year. He should be amazing this year, and he should see tons of volume, touchdown opportunities, yardage. He can catch the ball a little bit, so great pick. And it made me feel a little bit better that I got him for 49 when this team got Christian McCaffrey for 62, or Derrick Henry went for 54. So to get pretty much the consensus #1 overall player for $49 out of a $200 budget. Did I mention that this is a $200 budget? $200, not 100, 200, okay? So if you're trying to figure out the percentages, you just divide it by 2, okay? So if a player goes for $50, that was 25% of your budget. Or if they go for $10, that's 5% of your budget, okay? So the next pick I went with is Javonte Williams, who I took in my other standard snake draft. I got him for $28, which is 14% of my fab, and to me, that was a deal that was just, I couldn't pass that up. I got him at the end of the 2nd round in my other league, and I just like Javonte Williams because, first of all, he's extremely talented. Second of all, the Denver Broncos offense should be one of the most improved offenses in the entire league, simply because they went from Drew Lock at quarterback to bringing in Hall of Fame or future Hall of Fame quarterback Russell Wilson. And that addition alone should make this offense just more potent for fantasy. They should be scoring tons of points. And in that division, they'll be in tons of high-scoring games with the Raiders, the Chiefs, the Chargers. The only real somewhat red flag is that Melvin Gordon did re-sign with the Denver Broncos, so it should be somewhat of a committee. Even if it's a 50-50 split, I still think the offense will be good enough, and Javonte is good enough, where he will at least be good for fantasy. Maybe he won't be that league winner, but he'll be good. If he takes a bigger share of the backfield, let's say 60-40 or 70-30, or if Melvin Gordon were to miss time, Javonte would basically be a league winner, I would predict, right? With his talent and in this explosive offense. So I went with Javonte with my 2nd pick. Next pick, I went with Aaron Jones. And by the way, these picks weren't made in any order of like, oh, I like this player more or less. You can just throw a random player up. Like, I actually go with the strategy usually of throwing up a player that I don't want, just so someone gets him on their team, they have less money, and I don't have to worry about him, right? So next pick I got was Aaron Jones, running back of the Packers. This is someone that I had been targeting in fantasy. I know a lot of people are worried about the Packers offense because they lost some weapons, mainly Devontae Adams, but Aaron Rodgers is still there. And even though A.J. Dillon is an up-and-coming running back and he played really well last year and I expect him to have a big role this year, I think A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones will both be on the field quite a bit this year. Aaron Jones he's had a recent history of being a bit boom or bust. With all the vacated targets the Packers have with Devontae Adams, especially out of town, I think there is some potential to see some more passing work go to the running backs because those passes have to go somewhere, right? So those are my 3 running backs, or those are the first 3 running backs I took. We took another running back later. And to get Aaron Jones for basically 10.5% of my budget, I thought that was a steal. Next up, this is a 2 quarterback league. So that means quarterbacks are valued even higher than in a 1 quarterback league because you have to start 2 of them. Technically, it's a super flex, so you could start a non-quarterback, but you ideally want to be starting a quarterback because they're going to be scoring more more points than, you know, the typical non-quarterback player, unless like you really have a horrible second quarterback or something, right? And this is a 4 points for passing touchdowns, 6 points for rushing touchdowns, and you know they get a point for rushing, and what is it, like a point for every 25 yards of passing or whatever the standard thing is, something like that. So my first quarterback was Dak Prescott, and to get him for $15 out of $200, I thought that was a steal. Dak is not someone that I thought about really targeting in any draft, but since I had already spent up on 3 running backs, to get this value at quarterback, I knew I had to take it when I could get it, because I don't think with some of the changes that happened in Dallas, mainly Amari Cooper going to the Cleveland Browns, and Michael Gallup potentially missing the start of the season, this offense might not be as dangerous as it's been in the past. But on the other hand, the Cowboys' defense did generate a lot of turnovers that turned directly into defensive touchdowns last year. So let's say the Cowboys still generate turnovers, but instead of returning it for a touchdown, they're short of the goal line. They hand it over to the offense. That's another scoring opportunity for this team. So long story short, I expect Dak to be very, very solid, very good for fantasy. Probably a low to mid-range quarterback 1, maybe a high quarterback 2 if things really don't go well. But I like Dak. I got him as my quarterback 1. Next, I went with Jaylen Waddle. Again, not a player that I had really been targeting specifically in fantasy, but when I saw his price, I knew I had to bid. To get Jaylen Waddle for $12, which is 6% of my budget as my first wide receiver on my team, I'll take that. Obviously, he had an amazing season, an amazing rookie season last year. I believe he set the rookie reception record. Now, obviously, he was very hyped up coming into this year until they brought Tyreek Hill into that Miami Dolphins offense. So now Hill kind of is more of the wide receiver 1, Jaylen Waddle the wide receiver 2. I don't know what the target distribution is going to be like. Hopefully Tua can get the ball to both of them quite a bit. But at that price, I still think that was a great value for Jaylen Waddle. And in a half PPR league, he should see enough volume to at least get some catches, right? And he's got speed where I think he could have more big plays than last year. Next up, I went with Brandin Cooks. This is someone that I was targeting in fantasy. I didn't get him in my other league, so I really wanted him in this league because I think he's just always underrated. He's going to be consistent in that Houston Texans offense is pretty much the only target on the team. Him and Davis Mills had a good connection last year, and I think they'll rekindle that. I don't expect the Texans to be winning too many games, so I think in garbage time, Brandin Cooks will see a decent amount of work, and I expect him to have, you know, a little over 1,000 yards, you know, 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 yards, and a handful of touchdowns. And at that price, $18, 9% of my budget, I will take that. Next up, Kirk Cousins. I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan, and Kirk Cousins is actually one of my kind of favorite sleeper quarterbacks to target because he kind of goes at the end of drafts right at that range where I start to become uncomfortable with the quarterbacks. So I actually drafted Kirk Cousins in my other league. And having Kirk Cousins on your team, whether it's a snake draft or an auction draft, it just opens up so much space for the rest of your roster because I got him for only $10, 5% of my budget. And listen, the Minnesota Vikings, they still have Thielen, Jefferson, Dalvin Cook, KJ Osborne, Irv Smith if he can stay healthy. And they lost Mike Zimmer, a defensive-minded head coach who, let's be honest, I think the offense might be better with the new guy, Kevin O'Connell, coming in from the Rams, a more offensive-minded guy. Kirk Cousins doesn't run the ball at all, so he's a little bit limited. But I think as my quarterback 2 in a 2-quarterback league, he's like the perfect candidate to fill that role, especially when I'm so loaded at running back. And speaking of running back, I did end up getting Ezekiel Elliott for $17. I know he had a down year last year. Maybe Father Time is catching up with him. But he was also playing with an injury last year. And even if he did lose a step, he's still getting paid an insane amount, and he's still going to see volume in this offense unless he is just completely washed, which I personally don't believe he is, okay? Tony Pollard will have a role, but I think Ezekiel Elliott will still be the primary back in Dallas. And I got him for $17, right? Just for comparison, A.J. Dillon went for $14. Like, I like A.J. Dillon, don't get me wrong, but I feel like Ezekiel Elliott is the better value. A.J. Dillon, especially if Aaron Jones misses time, he could be great for fantasy. Don't get me wrong. I love A.J. Dillon. He's one of my favorite kind of later picks. But I went with Zeke. I went with Zeke. Great value. I got a discount on a guy that's usually pretty good. Next up, we add yet another value wide receiver to the team, and that is DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks. And I feel like I say this in every mock draft or draft recap video that I've made on this channel this year, but DK Metcalf is someone that I thought I didn't like in fantasy because they lost Russell Wilson, right? And even with Russ last year, although Russ was injured, so I give him a little bit of a pass. He kind of had a hand injury. He might have rushed through. But even with Russ, DK didn't have the most stellar season last year. He was a very highly drafted wide receiver last season, and I feel like he kind of let people down. But this year, I got him in the 5th round of my other draft. I believe the end of the 5th, beginning of the 6th. I could be mistaken with that, but I think that's where I got him. And in this league, I got him for $10, 5% of my budget. I don't need him to be a top 5 wide receiver at that value, especially with my solid 2 quarterbacks and with my amazing stable of running backs. Okay, so as my wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2. I mean, I don't really have a cutout wide receiver 1. What I have is a trio of wide receiver 2s who could put up wide receiver 1 numbers if things go right. So Metcalf for $10, that's a great value. Another great wide receiver value, Darnell Mooney of the Bears. He kind of showed up and showed out last year a little bit. Obviously, the quarterback situation there with Justin Fields is a little murky right now. He started slow last year, but he kind of put some things together down the stretch of last season. And regardless, Darnell Mooney put up numbers with Allen Robinson there. Now Allen Robinson is gone. Is that a good thing or a bad thing for Mooney? I don't know, because some coverage has to be given to Allen Robinson. I don't know the statistics of who is covered more or less, but when you take Allen Robinson off of a team, they're probably going to be worse in general. The offense as a whole, I expect to struggle. But what I do know is that Darnell Mooney will get volume and a lot of it. And at a $9 price tag, I'll take that. I will take that as my 4th wide receiver off the board. That's fine with me. And at this point, I was pretty much running low on funds, so I could only make pretty low bets. I picked up Kenneth Walker for $1. I put him up for a bid. If someone else would have bid on him, I would have been fine letting him walk. But I know he's kind of been dealing with an injury, and Rashad Penny should get the first crack at the job. But if Kenneth Walker heals up and Rashad Penny sustains an injury, which, let's be honest, he's known to do, Kenneth Walker will walk, pun intended, into a starting role for the Seattle Seahawks. Is that going to be a glorious role with tons of scoring and end zone opportunities? Probably not. But for $1 at the end of the draft, I'll take it. And if I need to cut him to pick someone else up, I'm fine doing that. Now, I do have a gaping hole, at one position, and that is tight end. And if you're in this situation, one guy that I think you could pick up in an auction league, I know the season is starting. I'm recording this on September 7th, and the season starts on August 8th. But even if you're trying to make a trade or something, I think Zach Ertz will have a somewhat decent season, not light the world on fire, but for $2, especially with DeAndre Hopkins missing 6 games for the Arizona Cardinals. I think he'll see targets, and especially in a half PPR league at that position, I'll take that. You know what I mean? He should keep me afloat. Next up, I did bid $3 on Deshaun Watson. I did already drop him. I wasn't sure if we could put him on the IR spot. I couldn't because he's suspended, not injured. So I dropped him already. And I'll show you my full team after this. Next up, Nyheim Hines. Got him for $1. He's the backup for the Indianapolis Colts. I actually do have Jonathan Taylor. I don't know what to say about handcuffing running backs. It does limit your upside, but at this point in the draft, there really wasn't anyone else that really got me going. Plus, since I have such exposure to Jonathan Taylor, I didn't have him handcuffed in either two of my leagues. So I figured I'll pick up his handcuff. And let's say he's one of those players that gets hurt before the season or week 1. At least in one league, I have his handcuff. But again, someone I can drop. And then he'll probably get the starting role after a Jonathan Taylor injury the week I drop him. Knock on wood. That would suck. Speaking of handcuffs, I picked up Alexander Mattison. If you're going to pick up a handcuff, if you want higher upside for your team as a whole, it's better to pick up the handcuff of another player, just because if the starter gets hurt, another team loses their starter and you gain the starter for that team. And let's be honest, Dalvin Cook is known to miss some games, okay? And when Alexander Mattison fills in, he's good for fantasy. So someone I could drop, but I'm going to try to hold on to him just because I expect him to at least start a few games this season, just given the history of Dalvin Cook's injury history, right? And then finally, this is a 2-quarterback league. I like to have 3 quarterbacks when I leave the draft. Last year, my draft was pitiful. I spent so much money on like the top, like Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, Travis Kelce. I had no money left. And my quarterbacks ended up being like Teddy Bridgewater, Zach Wilson, Jared Goff, like stuff that just makes you want to throw up. So with Dak Prescott and Kirk Cousins as my top 2 quarterbacks, I'm very secure with that. Quarterback 3 is a little more questionable. I picked up Davis Mills for $3 at the end of the draft. I just bid the rest of my budget on him. He was kind of hidden on the draft board. I feel like he would have gone a little bit earlier and maybe for a little bit more money if people would have noticed him. I think some people saw him, but I didn't see him until I really scrolled. And yeah, he flashed a little bit last year. You know, I don't want to have to start him, but there's bye weeks, potential injuries for Dak or Kirk. So in a pinch, I'll start him. And yeah, that's my whole team. Some players I was targeting in this draft were Jalen Hurts, Russell Wilson, and Kirk Cousins at quarterback. Jalen Hurts is one of my favorite quarterbacks to target in fantasy, but I don't have him in any leagues. It really, really sucks. And I believe he went for $24. So he went for a good price at least. And then Russell Wilson went for $22. So I saved money at quarterback and I still got some pretty good options. Some other people I was targeting at running back, I was targeting AJ Dillon just because on the website he was listed as $2 or $4 or something. But like I said, he ended up going for, what was it, $17 or something like that. I can't find him. Where is he? I don't know. I thought he was on this team. Was he not on that team? There he is. Sorry, I'm blind. Well, I don't even think I can see my team. But he went for $14, so not as much as a value as I thought. Ramondre Stevenson was another value that I didn't get. He went for $4. There were a lot of tight ends I liked at their potential prices. A lot of tight ends went for cheap. Goddard went for $5. Let's see. Dalton Schultz is someone that I was targeting a lot in fantasy. I have him in my 2 other leagues. He went for $7. Even a guy like George Kittle, he only went for $14. Darren Waller went for $14. Lots of value tight ends. So if you're interested in how much anyone else went for, these are the complete rosters. You can just pause it. But yeah, pretty interesting draft. This team had an interesting strategy. It's a 2-quarterback league. They got Mahomes for 33, Herbert for 27, and then they went with Kyler Murray for 32, and Lamar for 25. He says he wants to trade him. Listen, I don't recommend drafting to trade, but I talked to him about it, and he said that he recognizes how undervalued the quarterbacks kind of were in this draft. As a league, I feel like the quarterbacks kind of went for less than they should in a 2-quarterback league. So I guess his expectation is that as the season goes along, people will become desperate for a quarterback and, overpay. But we'll see what happens. Like, for example, this team, one of my good friends, his quarterbacks are Baker Mayfield and Jacoby Brissett. Last year, I had a pretty bad quarterback situation, and I believe this same team had an abundance of quarterbacks, and I tried to offer trades, and I just couldn't get a deal done. It just was never enough. So I don't know if he ended up ever trading one or not, if it worked out for him, but we'll see how that works. But yeah, here is my final roster, ladies and gentlemen. In a 10-team league, 2 quarterbacks, I really think I did a good job here. My running backs, I mean, it's impossible to beat. JT, Javonte Williams, Aaron Jones, and Ezekiel Elliott on the bench? Are we serious right now? That's what I got going on here? I almost feel bad that I drafted him, but running backs get injured. Some of them won't work out, so having that extra running back that I can rely on with an injury or someone's being bad or a bye week, I'm fine with that, especially because I got Zeke for such a value. My wide receiver core, listen, it's not world beating, but with the rest of my team's strengths, I think it's sufficient. I mean, there's teams that are starting like people you don't. I mean, they're starting Kadarius Toney, Allen Lazard. That team that drafted 4 quarterbacks, they're doing things like that, which those guys have potential. But do you really want to start them week 1? Maybe if you're in a pinch. You know, we'll see how good they are. But just to kind of give you some reference for how my team stacks up, I think we did pretty well. I mean, he's starting James Robinson and Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Jameis Winston, Carson Wentz. So my quarterbacks are better, running backs are better. His receivers are definitely better than mine, which we'll see how that. I already looked at Team Tro. This team, pretty. I mean, the Jared Goff at quarterback, that's not ideal. I don't really have any glaring weaknesses at my team other than maybe tight end and not having a true alpha wide receiver 1. Yeah, you see this team that went heavy at quarterback. ETN, Elijah Mitchell, and Gibson are their running backs. Elijah Moore, Kadarius Toney, and Allen Lazard. They might be good, but to rely on that many sort of question marks week 1 is a little sketchy, at least in my opinion. Satan's employee of the month. Starting J.D. McKissick and Rondale Moore week 1. Again, McKissick should be involved in PPR, but as your running back 2, that's a little risky. Rondale Moore, I mean, we haven't seen him do anything really of note, and you're starting him week 1, right? This is a team that I actually thought did a pretty good job. They got 2 solid quarterbacks with Stafford and Russell Wilson. And then at running back, they got Mixon, Chubb, and James Conner. At wide receiver, they got Debo, Juju, and Allen Robinson. And then one of my favorite value tight ends in the world, Dalton Schultz. Cole Kmet on the bench. Cam Akers on the bench. Dameon Pierce on the bench. Tua on the bench. I think this team did a really good job. Obviously, question marks with Debo Samuel, James Conner, and Akers just because of their injuries. But if they're on, they're on. And then Nick Chubb isn't great, especially in half PPR, but he's very solid. He's a great player, but for fantasy, he kind of lets people down just because he doesn't catch the ball, really. And then this team, this is a pretty solid team, although Dobbins and Godwin, who knows what their status is. But overall, this is a pretty solid team, I would say. They got Aaron Rodgers for like $8, I think. That would have been a nice pick to make. Get him for $9. And then this team right here is pretty. I mean, I wouldn't want to be starting Darrell Henderson, but I expect it to be a committee for the Rams. So, I mean, we'll see. Between Henderson, Pollard, Tyler Algier, and Mike Davis to start the season, at least with the injuries in Baltimore, it might work out. And he has Jalen Hurts, which I love. And then Hickey's heroes and mid quarterbacks for fantasy. Najee, Eckler, and Montgomery. Great little running back core. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, Terry McLaurin, and Amari Cooper at wide receiver. I think Amon-Ra could be, good for fantasy. McLaurin he's great talent, but his quarterbacks have really been holding him back. Will Carson Wentz fix that? I don't know. And then Amari Cooper, we thought he'd be playing with Deshaun Watson. He's going to be playing with Jacoby Brissett for the first 11 games. So he's a little limited there, but solid teams. I got Rashad Penny there too, Michael Thomas, Tyler Lockett. So he's got some depth. So that's just kind of how my team stacks up. I think my team's the best. Comment below if you think my team is the best. What would you do differently? Oh, and I did mention that I dropped Deshaun Watson. Nope, wrong thing. Recent activity. So I've already made a few moves. I added Brian Robinson. Pro tip. He is eligible for the IR spot, so I picked him up, put him on the IR spot, and then I added Mike Gesicki. And then I was like, oh, Gus Edwards is also a free agent and eligible for IR. So I dropped Mike Gesicki, added Gus Edwards, and then I decided, you know what, I want Albert O on my team over Mike Gesicki. I don't know why. So now I have some players on my injured reserve that if they come back, maybe they'll play a role for my team. And I also took a shot on Albert O, just in case, because you never know in fantasy. So with that being said, that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please make sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.